Okay, all right. Well, first of all, thanks for showing up today. I hope you're enjoying the course that's being run here and that this is making sense. My little stint with you this afternoon is designed to come after Harriet's session that you did on looking at the SDGs. And it's very much a practical applied session. So it's thinking about what does the SDGs mean for me and the world of work that I'm going to be entering shortly, either next year, year after that, but either way, or if you're thinking of university in 2 or 3 years' time. So I've got the PowerPoint as the kind of spine of the 2.5 hours, but we're going to break into groups a lot, into pairs or groups of 3, so that you can do some thinking about some of the ideas and the concepts that I'm going to be introducing. So first of all, I'd like to explain the 4 sections that we're going to talk through in this session. So we're going to talk about a little bit how business and the world has changed so much, not just in the last 10 years, but even in the last 30 or 40 years, in a way that perhaps the school curriculum might not have kept up with that change. So it's thinking through where some of those gaps might be. Then we're going to talk about new approaches to careers and livelihoods and lifestyles and how that might apply to you, working forwards into the future. And then we're going to start asking, so what characteristics will you need, will each one of you as individuals need? What are the characteristics and the qualities and the skills that you will need for the world of work in the 21st century? And that's not about your GCSEs or what A-levels you might be pursuing or what degree course or vocational training you might be doing. It's about what are my qualities and the skills that I'm going to need around that. So you've got some sort of staging posts that hopefully the school is providing for you here, but it's about what you're going to do next. And then after that, then we're going to move on to how you guys can become more resilient in the world of work. So ways to help you to do that, which isn't about formal qualifications, it's about behaviours and attributes and ways you might think about approaching the world of work. So for a very quick recap, the world has changed a lot in the last couple of 100 years. Are you familiar with the idea of the 4th Industrial Revolution, which we're in now? Have you talked about that at all at school or at home or at work? So the 18th century, we had the first Industrial Revolution where we got the age of steam. This country's littered with things by Isambard Krim de Brunel. You might have been over one of his bridges or on one of his railways. Then in the second Industrial Revolution, we moved on to electricity and scientific advancements that led to mass production. Then we moved on in the 1950s and we got to computers. And where we are now is in this uber-connected world. So it's just utterly normal for us all to have something in our pockets that connects us globally, everywhere. That's still an incredibly new thing. That was new in my lifetime 20 years ago. The first mobile phone I got also had a radio on it. And I can remember showing it very proudly to my friends and them saying, but what would you use a radio for on your phone? A phone is a phone, a radio is a radio. So that's literally only 20 years ago. So a lot has changed very, very recently. And that's the world that you're born into. So what's interesting is that the world of work is still catching up with that. And certainly the world of education has got quite a ways to go to catch up with that. So hopefully this whole program is going to help you to be more relevant to that world of work that you're going to be in shortly. So very briefly, I'd just like to talk through some of the things that have changed in the last few decades and how that might be a good thing. We've moved from industrial capitalism, where we grew up with Encyclopedia Britannica's on the desk. What do you guys use now when you want to find something out? Where do you go? Yeah, probably these guys. Yeah, which is a free service. So I pay £3 a month to Wikipedia because I'm really glad I use it all the time. So yeah, it's funded by individuals. It's not sponsored by advertising, and they're trying to keep it that way. Historically, we worked on a system of trade secrets and patents. So people went to a patent office and registered their thing that they were then able to charge for. What happens now? Anyone know about the first open computer code? Linux? It's free. A lot of it's free. You can go and get it online. So now, a lot of this stuff is done by individuals working together online and just putting it out there on free. The World Wide Web could have been kept secret, could have been patented, could have been something that you charged for. And the guy who invented it said, this is for everyone. We all need to have access to this. Same with things like this. These are probably phone companies you've never heard of. But right now, if you want to talk to people, you probably will use something on your phone. It might be Skype, it might be Zoom. I expect you all have WhatsApp groups. So it's a completely different way of communicating, which doesn't depend on a phone line coming into your house. And of course, in countries that did not have that level of technology to begin with, they didn't go through those stages of the Industrial Revolution, like South Africa, they just leapfrogged straight to mobile phones. So they were way ahead of us because they just leapt straight there. They didn't need to go through that process. Then economies of scale, this idea that you make lots and lots and lots of things and then it gets cheaper. What we've moved to now is this very interesting idea of the economies of free. What have I got that is something I can use somewhere else? In my house, in my home, in my head? Do I have some excess capacity somewhere that I could deploy somewhere else? So people are really, really thinking differently about this idea of ownership, whether or not you need to own a home or a place to live, or a car, or a phone, or a vacuum cleaner, a hairdryer, a drill. Do I need to own that, or do I just rent it by the hour? What is it about what I have that makes me unique to a future employer that means that they'll choose me, not somebody else? So it all becomes much more experimental and optional in terms of how you use what you've got. And then we've gone from monoculture, very centralized systems, to this whole breakout now where you've got a collaborative economy where you can just make groups together. So you might be making groups to help with your homework. You might be making groups about where you're going to go on Friday night. You might be making groups about some teacher you don't like. There are multiple WhatsApp groups everywhere where basically we're collaborating. I heard this amazing story about something that happened with a homework app the other day. I don't know if you guys have come across this. What do you use? Do you have Show My Homework, or do you have a homework app that this school uses? No. Classroom. Okay. So yeah, my kids use Show My Homework, which means that we and they see in real time what their tasks are. In China, recently in Wuhan province, so where the center of the first outbreak of COVID-19 was, where the students were sent home, which is looking like it might happen here quite soon. So everything was being done on Wuhan remotely by the app. So the students got together collaboratively and they all reviewed that app on the App Store and gave it a 1 star only, which according to the algorithm set up by the App Store meant that the app was deleted. Wow. Yeah. It's quite an interesting way of making sure you don't get any homework anymore. But that was collaborative working by those kids who worked out that they could delete an app by using an algorithm. So I think that's a really interesting way of thinking differently about what you can do with your phone. Yeah, it's really beating the system at its own game. So yeah, I'm not advocating that, obviously, but I'm saying it's quite an interesting way of thinking about what you can do with what you've got. This is an interesting one about assets and wealth being controlled by the few. So there was a 784 rule, 7% of the country own 84% of the wealth. In many countries, that's actually getting worse, not better. But what is interesting is you're seeing this role of individuals changing quite a lot. So it's not just about what your income is, it's also what you do with your skills and your attributes. So thinking about what your capacity is and what your ability is so much more important than thinking about, I'm going to just do this thing for this salary for this many hours of each week, because we work so differently now. When I grew up, there were only 3 channels, and there was much excitement when Channel 4 was launched, and a lot of argument about there couldn't possibly be the need for a 4th channel. I don't know if we would even know now how many channels we've got on our TV set. And we consume television totally differently, don't we? We have drops on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever you use. And of course YouTube, so we make our own telly. And when YouTube was launched again, everybody's like, why would you need this? What is this for? And now it's a huge teaching resource apart from anything else. I don't know, do you guys use YouTube for learning? Yeah, which topics? Computer science, maths, there's some really good math stuff. Yeah, yeah. Plumbing, yeah, no, you can plumb your own dishwasher thanks to YouTube now. It's absolutely amazing. Google Maps, now we've got OpenStreetMaps, people making their own. That's what they want to do, so they do. Banks, 2008, too big to fail. Now we've got multiple small co-ops, small providers, High street banks are very, very thin on the ground now in the UK compared to 20 years ago. So, I don't know about you guys, but I use an online bank. I don't have occasion to go to a physical bank these days, except for when my mother still writes me a cheque because she hasn't moved to online banking. So, there's a very time limited period where we're still going to keep that going. So the government was talking about withdrawing cash. And then they had to pedal back on that because for people who are older or who don't have access to the digital economy, they still need cash. So that would have been excluding for people who are older or poorer. But it's a very different world that we're working in now. So sort of beginning to think differently about what to do with this. Basically, the point I'm trying to put across is this one, that you get intangibles and they're visible and they're valued. You take what's intangible and you start to think about ways in which you can use it. So that's quite a different way of thinking about the world. So monopoly status, what we're looking at now is maximising participation. So what could you do as a group? What could you do as a table? What can you do as an individual? And making sure that you've used that in interesting and different ways. So at your tables now, I'd just like you to think very briefly about how that makes you feel. Thinking about all that change in only the last, some of it 30 years, but many of these things only in the last 10 years. Maybe you knew it already. Maybe some of this is a new idea. So can you just jot down at your table, what do you feel about that for you for the next 10 years, for how you might go with that? It's literally just a quick check-in, 2-3 minutes. And then you can call out